The mountain fog clung to Mercy's shoulders like a shawl of ghosts as she climbed the narrow path toward Harlan Ridge. 15 years had passed since she'd last walked these slopes, but her feet remembered every stone, every twisted root that broke through the red clay. The war had ended 3 years ago, and she'd spent every day since then working, saving, and searching for any trace of the daughter who'd been torn from her arms when she was barely 6 years old. Mercy was 42 now, though the mirror showed a woman who could pass for 50. The years of bondage had carved lines into her face that freedom couldn't erase. Her hands, skilled in healing and tender in touch, bore the calluses of fieldwork, laundry, and the endless labor that had defined her existence. But those same hands had also brought countless babies into the world, set broken bones, and mixed poultices that drew fever from burning skin. She'd been property once, valued for her nursing skills, but she'd never stopped being a mother. The ridge came into view through the morning mist, and Mercy's heart clenched. The old Brennan plantation house still stood, though it sagged now, like a forgotten dream. The white columns were grey with neglect, and the gardens where she'd once gathered herbs had gone wild. She'd heard the family had fallen on hard times after the war, but she hadn't come for them. She'd come for answers. Her daughter's name was Sarah, sweet Sarah, with eyes like polished chestnuts and a laugh that sounded like water over stones. Mercy had named her after the biblical Sarah, hoping her daughter would also be the beginning of something miraculous, a line of free descendants who would never know chains. But Colonel Brennan had other plans. When his gambling debts mounted and his cotton yields fell, he'd sold Sarah to a trader heading west into the deeper mountains toward Tennessee and Kentucky, where the coal mines were opening and labor was scarce. Mercy had screamed until her throat bled. She'd fought until the overseer's whip had laid her back open in stripes that still ached when the weather turned cold. And when they'd finally let her up from the punishment post, Sarah was gone. Not even the other enslaved people on the plantation could tell her where. The trader had come in the night like a thief, though he was stealing something infinitely more precious than silver. The years that followed were a blur of grief and determination. Mercy had become quieter, harder, more watchful. She tended to the sick and injured with mechanical efficiency, saving her true self for the secret moments when she could search through papers in the big house, listen to conversations, and piece together fragments of information about slave traders, routes, and buyers. She'd learned that knowledge was a form of freedom, even when her body remained in bondage. When Sherman's army came through in the last year of the war, chaos had erupted on the plantation. Some had fled immediately, others had stayed from fear or lack of anywhere to go. Mercy had waited, nursing wounded soldiers from both sides, blue and gray, until the fighting moved on, and the Brennan family fortune dissolved like sugar in rain. Then she'd left, following the rumor of a freedmen's settlement in Asheville, where former slaves were helping each other navigate their new lives. In Asheville, she'd found work as a nurse again, this time for wages. The money came slowly, often paid in goods rather than cash, but she saved every penny. She'd also found something more valuable than gold: information. The freedmen's community was a network of stories, memories, and names. People were searching for lost family members, sharing what they knew, helping each other piece together the scattered fragments of their lives. An old man named Solomon, who'd worked as a blacksmith on a plantation near Knoxville, had been the one to give her the first real lead. He'd seen a girl matching Sarah's description at a logging camp near the Virginia border about 8 years ago. The girl had been with a white family named Hutchins, who ran a small mountain farm and hired out their slaves to the timber companies. Solomon couldn't be certain it was Sarah, but the age was right, and he remembered the girl because she'd had a distinctive birthmark on her left shoulder, a mark shaped like a bird in flight. Mercy had wept when he described it. Sarah had been born with that mark, and Mercy had kissed it 1,000 times, telling her daughter she was meant to fly free. Now, Mercy stood at the Brennan house door and knocked. The sound echoed hollow inside, and for a long moment she thought no one would answer. Then slow footsteps approached, and the door creaked open. Mrs. Brennan stood in the doorway, aged beyond recognition. The proud woman who'd once swept through rooms in silk and pearls now wore a faded dress that had been mended many times. Her hair was white, her face gaunt, and her eyes held the bewildered look of someone who'd lost everything she thought was permanent. Yes? Her voice was uncertain, no longer imperious. Mrs. Brennan, it's Mercy. I worked here before the war. Recognition flickered, followed by something that might have been shame. Mercy, yes, I remember. I need to know where you sent my daughter, Sarah. I need to know who bought her and where she went. Mrs. Brennan's hand fluttered to her throat. That was so long ago. My husband handled all of that. Your husband is dead, ma'am. I heard he died at Chickamauga. But there must be records, papers, something that shows where she went. I don't have to tell you anything, Mrs. Brennan said, but there was no force behind the words, only weariness. Mercy stepped closer. No, you don't. But I'm asking anyway. I'm asking one mother to another. You had 3 children. You know what it means to love them. I only had 1, and she was stolen from me. If you have any mercy in your heart, any at all, you'll help me find her. Mrs. Brennan's eyes filled with tears. My son died in the war. My daughter's married and moved north. They won't answer my letters. I'm alone here with nothing but ghosts and debts. Then we've both lost everything, Mercy said quietly. But I still have hope. Don't take that from me, too. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of years and choices that couldn't be unmade. Finally, Mrs. Brennan nodded and stepped back from the door. Come in. I'll look for the papers. I don't know if I still have them, but I'll look. The house smelled of damp and decay. Furniture sat under dusty sheets like sleeping spirits, and the wallpaper peeled in long curls from the walls. Mercy followed Mrs. Brennan to what had been the Colonel's study, a room she'd only entered once before, when she'd been summoned to treat him for gout and found him drunk and raging about the cost of keeping slaves fed. Mrs. Brennan pulled open drawers and sifted through papers with trembling hands. Most were bills, notices of debt, and letters from creditors. But in the bottom drawer of the old secretary desk, she found a leather-bound ledger. She opened it carefully, the spine cracking, and turned the pages. Here, she said finally, her finger resting on an entry. Sarah, age 6. Sold to Mitchell Pierce, trader. Destination listed as Hutchins Farm, Scott County, Virginia. Delivered September 1850. Mercy's heart hammered in her chest. Scott County, Virginia. The western edge of Virginia, deep in the mountains. Solomon had been right about the Hutchins family. Is there anything else? Any other information? Mrs. Brennan scanned the page. It says she was sold for $800. That was a good price for a child. She looked up, and her face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We needed the money. The plantation was failing even then. I told myself it was just business, that it was the way things were done. But I knew what it meant to you. Mercy took the ledger and carefully copied the information into the small notebook she carried. Her hand was steady, despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. She'd learned long ago that surviving meant containing her feelings until she was alone. Thank you, she said when she'd finished writing. Will you find her? Mrs. Brennan asked. I'll die trying. Mercy left the house and walked back down the mountain as the sun climbed higher, burning away the fog. Scott County, Virginia. It was at least a week's journey on foot, longer if the weather turned bad, but she had a name, a place, and renewed hope. Sarah would be 21 now, a grown woman. Would she remember her mother? Would she even know she'd been born with a different name, in a different place? The questions plagued Mercy as she made her way back toward Asheville. She had enough money saved for the journey, and she knew other freedmen who'd traveled through Scott County. She'd ask around, get directions, find out what she could about the Hutchins family and what had happened to their holdings after emancipation. That evening, back in the small room she rented above a dry goods store, Mercy sat by the window and watched the sun set behind the mountains. She thought about Sarah as a child, the way she'd hummed while playing with corn-husk dolls, the way she'd clung to Mercy's neck when thunder rolled across the hills. She thought about all the moments she'd missed, first words, first steps, the slow transformation from child to young woman. But she also thought about resilience, about the strength that ran in their blood like an underground river. Sarah had survived. Mercy felt it in her bones. Her daughter was out there somewhere, perhaps with children of her own, perhaps alone, but alive. And Mercy would find her. She pulled out a small cloth bundle and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a carved wooden bird, no bigger than her thumb. She'd made it herself from a piece of oak, working on it late at night by candlelight in the slave quarters. She'd given it to Sarah the night before she was taken, pressing it into her small hand and telling her to keep it safe, to remember that she came from people who could create beauty even in captivity. Mercy held the bird's twin, the one she'd kept for herself, and pressed it to her heart. I'm coming, baby girl, she whispered. I'm coming to bring you home. The next morning, Mercy began her preparations. She visited the Freedmen's Community Center, a converted barn where people gathered to share news and resources. She spoke with travelers who knew the mountain routes, learning which roads were safest, where she might find food and shelter, and which towns to avoid where former Confederates still made life dangerous for black travelers. An elderly woman named Ruth, who'd walked from South Carolina to North Carolina after the war, gave Mercy a detailed map she'd drawn herself. The mountains are different now, Ruth said. Some places welcome us, some don't. Trust your instincts. If a place feels wrong, keep moving. A young man named Jacob, who worked as a courier carrying messages between freedmen settlements, offered to accompany her part of the way. I'm heading toward the Virginia border next week. I can take you as far as Bristol. From there, you'll be maybe 2 days from Scott County." Mercy accepted gratefully. Traveling with a companion would be safer, and Jacob knew the roads well. They agreed to leave in 3 days, giving Mercy time to settle her affairs and pack for the journey. She bought sturdy boots, a wool cloak, and dried food that would keep. She packed her medicine bundle with herbs, bandages, and the few surgical tools she owned. People would need healing wherever she went, and her skills could earn her food and shelter along the way. On her last night in Asheville, Mercy attended a gathering at the community center. Someone had brought a fiddle, and people sang songs of sorrow and hope, old spirituals mixed with new freedom songs. Mercy listened, letting the music wash over her, drawing strength from the collective voice of her people. An old woman named Clara, who'd been a midwife on a plantation in Alabama, sat down beside Mercy and took her hand. "You're searching for your child," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my daughter, Sarah." Clara nodded. "I lost 3 children to the auction block. Never found any of them. But I keep hoping that somewhere they're alive and free. That hope keeps me breathing. You hold on to yours, child. Hold on tight and don't let go, no matter what you find." "I won't," Mercy promised. "And remember," Clara said, squeezing her hand, "whatever happens, you're not alone. We're all searching for something we lost. We're all trying to piece ourselves back together. That's what freedom is, the chance to gather up the scattered pieces of our lives and make them whole again." The journey began on a cool October morning. Jacob led the way, his long stride eating up the miles, while Mercy kept pace beside him. They followed old wagon roads that climbed higher into the mountains, passing through valleys where morning mist hung like curtains, and ridges where the autumn colors blazed in impossible reds and golds. They spent the first night at a freedmen's settlement near Marshall, where they were welcomed with food and a place to sleep in a barn. The people there shared stories of their own searches and reunions. Some had found family members, many had not. But they all understood the necessity of looking, of refusing to accept loss as final. The second day brought rain, cold and steady, that soaked through their clothes despite the oiled canvas cloaks they wore. They pressed on, taking shelter in abandoned cabins and under rock overhangs when the rain grew too heavy. Jacob proved to be good company, sharing stories from his travels and asking thoughtful questions about Mercy's nursing work. "My mother was a healer too," he said, as they huddled under a dripping pine tree, waiting out a particularly fierce downpour. "She knew plants like they were her children could cure almost anything. She died of fever when I was 12, but I still remember her teaching me which leaves to chew for a toothache, which bark to boil for congestion." "Your mother was wise," Mercy said. "That knowledge is precious. Don't let it be lost." "I won't. I write things down now. I'm not much for letters, but I can draw. I draw the plants and note what they're for. Someday maybe I'll pass it on to my own children, if I'm blessed enough to have any." They talked about the future, about what they hoped to build in this new world of freedom. Jacob dreamed of owning land, a small farm where he could grow food and raise animals. Mercy talked about her hope of establishing a clinic, a place where people could come for healing regardless of their ability to pay. But first, she always said, I have to find Sarah. On the fourth day, they reached Bristol, a town that straddled the border between Tennessee and Virginia. Jacob had deliveries to make, letters and small packages for people in the surrounding area. He arranged for Mercy to stay with a family he knew, freedmen who ran a boarding house for black travelers. I'll be back through this way in about 2 weeks, Jacob said as they parted. If you need help getting back, or if you need anything at all, you leave word here. Mrs. Patterson will get it to me. Mercy thanked him, feeling a pang of anxiety as she watched him walk away. She was on her own now, close to her destination, but still so far from answers. Mrs. Patterson, a robust woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, showed Mercy to a small but clean room. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, she said. Meals are included, and if you can help with chores, that'd be appreciated but not required. Jacob says you're searching for your daughter. Yes, Mom. She was sold to a family in Scott County about 15 years ago. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew serious. Scott County's rough territory. Not everyone there has accepted that things have changed. You'll want to be careful. But there's a freedmen's community near Nicholsville, about a day's walk from here. They might have information that could help you. A man named Josiah Freeman runs a church there. He keeps records, helps people find family. You should talk to him. Hope flared in Mercy's chest. Thank you. I leave for Nicholsville tomorrow. That night, Mercy lay in the darkness and prayed. She wasn't a woman who prayed often. Her faith had been tested too many times by unanswered pleas. But tonight, she allowed herself to hope that someone or something was listening. She prayed for Sarah's safety, for the strength to continue, and for the courage to face whatever truth she might find. The road to Nicholsville wound through farmland and forests, past homesteads where smoke rose from chimneys and children played in yards. Mercy walked steadily, her eyes taking in everything, searching every face for some resemblance to the child she'd lost. She reached Nicholsville in the late afternoon and found the church easily. It was the only building with a cross on the roof, a modest structure made of rough-hewn logs with a small cemetery behind it. Mercy knocked on the door and waited. A man in his 50s opened the door, his face weathered but welcoming. Can I help you? I'm looking for Josiah Freeman. You found him. Come in. The church interior was simple but clean, with rows of wooden benches and a pulpit at the front. Josiah led Mercy to a small room off to the side that served as his office. Shelves lined the walls, filled with ledgers, Bibles, and stacks of papers. I help people find their families, Josiah said, settling into a chair and gesturing for Mercy to sit. Since the war ended, I've been keeping records of who's looking for whom, matching names and descriptions when I can. It's slow work, but we've had some successes. Tell me about your daughter. Mercy told him everything. Sarah's name, her age, the birthmark, the Hutchins family, the timeline of events. Josiah listened carefully, occasionally making notes in a ledger. When she finished, he sat back and stroked his beard thoughtfully. The Hutchins family, I know of them. They had a small farm northeast of here, up near the Clinch Mountain. Used to hire out their slaves to the logging camps and coal mines. When emancipation came, most of their slaves scattered. The family sold the farm a few years ago and moved, I'm not sure where. Mercy's heart sank. So the trail ends there. Not necessarily. I know a man named Thomas who used to work for the Hutchins family. He's free now, works as a carpenter in Weber City. If anyone would know what happened to the people who were there, it'd be him. I can give you directions." "Thank you," Mercy said, feeling hope kindle again. "Thank you so much." Josiah reached across the desk and patted her hand. "Don't thank me yet. Finding someone is just the first step. What comes after can be harder. Your daughter has lived a whole life without you. She may not remember you. She may have built a new family, a new identity. You have to be prepared for any outcome." "I know," Mercy said, "but I have to try. Even if she doesn't remember me, even if she doesn't want to know me, I have to try." "Then God bless you in your search, and when you find her, because I believe you will, come back and tell me. I'll add your story to my records. Every reunion gives hope to someone else who's still searching." Mercy left the church as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. She had a name and a place: Thomas, in Weber City. Tomorrow she would continue her journey. Tonight she would rest and gather her strength for whatever lay ahead. She found lodging in a small cabin rented by a family who took in travelers. Over a simple dinner of cornbread and beans, she listened to their stories of adjustment to freedom, of learning to navigate a world that promised opportunity but still harbored danger for people who looked like them. "We're building something new," the father said, a man named Henry who worked at the nearby sawmill. "It's hard, and some days I wonder if we'll make it. But my children will never know chains. That's worth every struggle." His words stayed with Mercy as she lay down to sleep. She thought about all the parents who'd made impossible choices, who'd sacrificed and struggled so their children might have better lives. She thought about her own mother, who died of fever when Mercy was young, but who taught her about healing herbs and the importance of remembering your name, your people, your worth. And she thought about Sarah, hoping that wherever she was, whoever she'd become, she still carried some memory of the mother who'd loved her, the mother who'd never stopped searching. The morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. Mercy set out for Weber City, following the directions Josiah had given her. The town was larger than she'd expected, with several stores, a mill, and rows of houses built to accommodate the workers who'd come seeking jobs in the timber and mining industries. She found Thomas at a work site where he was building a new storehouse. He was a tall man with powerful shoulders and hands scarred from years of labor. When Mercy approached and introduced herself, explaining her search, his expression grew solemn. "The Hutchins family," he said, setting down his tools. "Yes, I worked for them for 12 years before emancipation. I remember most of the people who were there." He paused, studying Mercy's face. "You say your daughter had a birthmark shaped like a bird?" "Yes." "On her left shoulder?" Thomas nodded slowly. "I remember a girl named Mary who had a mark like that. She came to the Hutchins farm when she was young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Worked in the house mostly, helping Mrs. Hutchins with cooking and cleaning." "Mary," Mercy whispered. They'd changed her name. Of course they had. "Where is she now? What happened to her?" "When the war ended and we were freed, Mary stayed on at the farm for a while. She had nowhere else to go. But then," Thomas hesitated, "then she married a man named Samuel Brown, a freedman who'd come through looking for work. They left together, heading east. I heard they settled somewhere in the mountains near Abingdon. Samuel was a skilled blacksmith, so I imagine he found work there. Abingdon, Mercy repeated. That's not far from here, is it? Maybe 30 miles, a 2-day walk. I don't know exactly where they settled, but Abingdon's not a large place. If they're still there, someone will know them. Mercy felt tears prick her eyes. After 15 years, she was so close. Can you tell me what she looked like? What kind of person she was? Thomas smiled, and his whole face softened. She was quiet, but strong, kind. She used to help tend the others when they got sick, learning what she could about healing. She had gentle hands and a patient way about her. And she sang sometimes. When she thought no one was listening, she had a beautiful voice. Mercy's hand went to her heart. Sarah, Mary, had followed in her footsteps as a healer. The knowledge was passed down, even across the chasm of separation. Thank you, Mercy said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for remembering her. I hope you find her, Thomas said, and I hope she's had a good life. She deserved that much. Mercy left Weber City with a lightness in her step that she hadn't felt in years. 30 miles to Abingdon, 2 days of walking, and then, perhaps, the end of her long search. The road to Abingdon took her through some of the most beautiful country she'd ever seen. The mountains rose on either side like sentinels, their peaks touched with the first snow of the season. The forests were alive with color, and clear streams rushed over rocks that glittered in the sunlight. Despite the beauty, Mercy barely noticed. Her mind was focused entirely on what lay ahead. She spent the first night in a small settlement, where she traded her nursing skills for food and shelter, treating a child with croup and an old man with a festering wound on his leg. The family wanted to pay her, but she refused money, asking only for directions to Abingdon and any information about a blacksmith named Samuel Brown. There's a few blacksmiths in Abingdon, the father told her. But I've heard of Samuel Brown. He's good at his work, does business with folks from all around, lives with his wife and children on the east edge of town, near the creek. Children. Sarah had children. Mercy was a grandmother, and she'd never even known. The second day's walk seemed both endless and too short. Mercy's emotions swung between excitement and terror. What would she say? How would Sarah react? Would she be angry that Mercy had taken so long to find her? Would she remember anything at all? As the sun began to set, Mercy reached the outskirts of Abingdon. She followed the directions she'd been given, walking along a creek until she saw a small house with smoke rising from the chimney and the distinctive sound of hammer on anvil ringing from a nearby forge. A man worked at the forge, his silhouette dark against the glow of the fire. Mercy approached slowly, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "Excuse me," she called. "Are you Samuel Brown?" The man looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was in his mid-20s, strong and capable looking. "Yes, ma'am. Can I help you?" "I'm looking for your wife. I believe she might be my daughter." Samuel's eyes widened. He set down his hammer and walked toward her. "Your daughter?" Her name was Sarah when she was born. She would have been sold to the Hutchins family when she was 6 years old. I'm told she was called Mary there. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face, followed by compassion. "Wait here," he said gently. "I'll get her." He walked to the house, and Mercy stood frozen, unable to move, barely able to breathe. A few moments later, the door opened and a woman stepped out. She was tall and graceful, with the same eyes Mercy remembered, the same curve of her cheek. She wore a simple dress and an apron, and she carried herself with quiet dignity. She looked at Mercy from across the yard, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Then the woman's hand went to her shoulder, to the place where the birthmark was hidden beneath her dress. Her eyes filled with tears. "Mama," she whispered. Mercy's legs gave out, and she fell to her knees in the dirt. "Sarah," she sobbed. "Oh, my Sarah." The woman ran across the yard and fell to her knees beside Mercy, and they wrapped their arms around each other, crying and laughing and holding on as if they'd never let go. 15 years of separation, 15 years of grief and hope and searching collapsed into this single moment of reunion. "I thought you were dead," Sarah cried. "They told me you were dead. I'm alive, and I never stopped looking for you, never." They held each other as the sun set and the stars began to appear. Two women who'd been torn apart by the cruelty of the world, but who'd found their way back to each other through love and determination and the kind of courage that only mothers know. The first days of reunion were a blur of tears, laughter, and stories shared late into the night by the fire. Sarah, who still went by Mary, the name she'd known longest, insisted that Mercy stay with her and Samuel. Their home was small but welcoming, with 2 rooms and a loft where their 3 children slept. Mercy met her grandchildren with her heart so full it ached. James, age 6, who had his mother's serious eyes. Lucy, age 4, who climbed into Mercy's lap without hesitation. And baby Daniel, just 8 months old, who gurgled and reached for his grandmother's face with tiny, grasping hands. Samuel proved to be a good man, patient and hard-working, who treated his wife with respect and his children with tenderness. He gave Mercy and Sarah space to reconnect, often taking the children to the forge or for walks along the creek so the 2 women could talk. And they talked endlessly. Mercy shared the story of her search, every dead end and small victory. Every night she'd cried herself to sleep, and every morning she'd woken with renewed determination. Sarah listened with tears streaming down her face, her hand gripping her mother's as if to make sure she was real. "I try to remember you," Sarah said one evening as they sat by the fire, the children asleep upstairs. "I had fragments, your voice singing, your hands on my face, the smell of the herbs you used to gather. But they told me you were dead, killed trying to run away. I mourned you. I thought I'd lost you forever." "Who told you that?" Mercy asked, though she could guess. "Mrs. Hutchins. She said it was better for me to forget, to accept my new life. She wasn't cruel, but she wasn't kind either. She just wanted me to be useful and obedient." "And the name? Why did they call you Mary?" Sarah shrugged. "They said Sarah was too proud a name for a slave child. Mary was more fitting. After a while, I forgot I'd ever been called anything else. It wasn't until freedom came that I even thought about who I'd been before." Mercy felt rage kindle in her chest, a cold fury at the people who tried to erase her daughter's identity, who'd stolen not just Sarah's freedom, but her very name and history. But she pushed the anger down. There would be time for that later. Right now, she wanted only to know her daughter, to fill in the years that had been stolen from them. Sarah shared her own story, and it was harder to hear than Mercy had imagined. The Hutchins farm had been remote and isolated. worked by only 6 enslaved people. Sarah had been the youngest. The work had been hard, but not brutal. Mrs. Hutchins had needed help with household tasks and had taught Sarah to cook, clean, and sew. Mr. Hutchins had mostly hired Sarah out to logging camps during the busy season, where she'd worked as a cook and laundress. There were some terrible times, Sarah said quietly, staring into the fire. Men at the camps who thought I was property they could use however they wanted. I learned to hide, to stay near the other women, to never be alone. Once, when I was 14, a foreman. She stopped, her jaw tightening. "You don't have to tell me," Mercy said, though her heart was breaking. "I want to. I need you to know. A foreman tried to force himself on me, but there was an old woman there, Aunt Bessie we called her. She hit him with the skillet and told him if he touched me again, she'd kill him in his sleep. She probably saved my life, or at least my soul. After that, she watched over me. When she died 2 years later, I thought I'd die of grief. She was the closest thing to a mother I'd had." Mercy pulled Sarah into her arms, rocking her as she had when she was small. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you." "It wasn't your fault. You did everything you could, and I survived. I'm here, and I have a good life now. That's what matters." But Mercy couldn't let go of the guilt, the searing knowledge that her daughter had suffered while she'd been powerless to help. She'd known intellectually that Sarah's life had been hard, but hearing the details made it real in a way that cut to the bone. Over the following days, they began to build a new relationship, one based not on the mother-child bond of Sarah's infancy, but on the connection between 2 grown women who'd both survived horrors and emerged intact. Mercy helped with the children and the household chores, grateful for the chance to be useful. She also began treating patients in the area, word of her skills spreading quickly through the community. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Mercy's arrival, a white woman came to the door asking for the healer. She was young, barely 20, and clearly pregnant. Her face was pale and drawn with pain. "Please," she begged, "I've been bleeding, and I'm so afraid I'll lose the baby. The doctor in town won't see me because my husband can't pay. Someone said there's a Negro healer here who might help." Mercy examined her carefully, noting the signs of a threatened miscarriage. She mixed a tea of herbs to help stop the bleeding and strengthen the womb, then instructed the woman to rest completely for at least a week. "Come back in 3 days and I'll check on you again," Mercy said. "And if the bleeding gets worse, send for me immediately." The woman burst into tears. Thank you so much. How can I pay you?" "You can pay me by taking care of yourself and that baby. That's all I need." Word of Mercy's skill and her willingness to treat anyone regardless of their ability to pay brought a steady stream of patients. Some offered payment in food or goods, which Mercy accepted graciously, knowing that Sarah and Samuel could use the help. Others had nothing to give, and Mercy treated them anyway. Sarah watched her mother work with a mixture of pride and wonder. "You're gifted," she said one evening. "The way you know just what people need, the way you can calm them, even when they're scared. Where did you learn all of this?" "My mother taught me some of it," Mercy said. "She was a healer too, though she died when I was young. After that, I learned from other healers on the plantation and from watching the white doctors when they came. I learned to read herbs and bodies the way some people read books. And I learned that healing is as much about listening and caring as it is about medicine. I want to learn, Sarah said. I want you to teach me.